Hey guys, Mr. Rogers here. Today we're going to work on comparing fractions. Okay, so if you remember what a fraction is a way to show a part of a whole. Okay, so what I mean by comparing fractions is in this case or in this video, I'm going to give you two fractions and you're going to look at both fractions to figure out which fraction is bigger. Okay, so between the two fractions, you're going to figure out which one is bigger. Okay, and in this video, I'm going to show you two different ways that you can use or two different methods to use to help you compare fractions. Okay, so one way is going to be a long way of showing taking two fractions and making like denominators, and then the second way is going to be similar to the long way, but we're not doing all the steps. We're going to do like the first step. Okay, that will make sense when I get into some examples here in a minute. Okay, so let's start off easy. So if I was to give you the fraction 3/4, and I want you to compare that fraction to 1/4, okay? The light bulb that should be going off in your head is I have like denominators. My denominators are the same. You want, in the fraction world, to make things easy, you want like denominators. That's going to make your life a whole lot more easy. Okay, so when I have like denominators, I'm not going to look at the denominators because they have the same parts that you're looking at. So each of these fractions deal with fourths, okay? So the part that we're going to look at is the numerators, okay? So our numerators are the ones that are different. Our first fraction is 3/4. My 3 is the numerator. My second fraction is 1/4. My numerator is 1. So when you have the same denominators for both fractions, you're just going to look at the numerators and figure out which numerator is larger. And then that means that fraction is larger. So when I look at 3 and 1, I know 3 is greater than 1. So 3/4 is greater than 1/4. Okay? So when your fractions have the same denominator, you're just going to look at the numerator, and whatever numerator is greater, that means that fraction is greater. Okay? So now let's get into a little more tricky problem. So if I was to give you the problem, 3/4 and 5/6, the first thing that should be going off in your head is I have unlike denominators. So that means things are going to get a little more tricky because we know in the fraction world and math class, when our fractions have the same denominators, your life is easy. When fractions have different denominators or unlike denominators, you are a little more challenged. You have to do a little more work to work on getting the same like denominators or comparing them or whatever you're doing. And in this case, we're comparing them. So what we need to look at our denominators and trying to make like denominators. So my first method I'm going to show you is the long way. Okay, so we're going to take these two fractions and we're going to make like denominators out of them. So if I look at 4 and 6, I know 4 is not a multiple of 6, and I know 6 is not a multiple of 4. Okay? But what I can do a common multiple of both 4 and 6. And when I look at 4 and 6, the first multiple that I think of is 24. Because I know 4 times 6 is 24, and 6 times 4 is 24. Okay, so the way I got the multiple that I'm going to use, I just took these and multiplied together. So 4 times 6 is 24. So we're going to look at both of these fractions dealing with pieces of 24. Okay, so we're going to look at the fractions of 24s. Okay, so when I look at this, when I look at 3/4 and I need to make this into a fraction that has 24 in the bottom or 24th in my denominator, I know 24 is going to be 6 times greater than 4. Okay, so the way I got this was I'm going to take 4 and I'm going to multiply by 6 to get to 24. So that means I'm going to do the same thing with my numerator. I'm going to take 3 and I'm going to multiply by 6. So 3 times 6 is 18. Okay, now, so my 3/4, when I convert it to a fraction dealing with denominator or a denominator of 24, I would get 18 out of 24. Now if I look over here with my 5, 6, if I move or make this fraction into a fraction of 24 being in the denominator, 24 is 4 times greater than 6. How I got that was 6 times 4 is 24. So I'm going to do that same thing with my numerator. I'm going to take 5, I'm going to multiply, well, I'm not multiplying by 5, I'm multiplying by 4, sorry. 5 times 4 is 20, okay? So when I took 5, 6, and I made this fraction to have a like denominator of 24, my new fraction is 20 over 24ths, or 20 24ths. Okay, so now I have like denominators. Now I'm going to compare the numerators, 18 and 20. I know 20 is greater than 18, so 18 24ths is less than 20 24ths. So if I go back to my original problem of 3/4, I'll write it over here. 3/4 and 5, 6, when I made like denominators of 24, my 5, 6 or my 20 24ths was greater. So 3/4 is less than 5, 6. Okay, so that is the long way. Let me show you the shortcut. Okay, or the second method I'm going to do, which is the shortcut, which is cross multiplying. So if I take that problem again, 3/4, I'm going to compare that to 5, 6. I'm going to cross multiply. Okay, and I said in the beginning of the video, this second method is doing exactly the same thing as my first method I showed you, except we're not doing that last step. We're only doing half of the work. So if I look right here, the way I'm going to do this cross multiplying is I'm going to take my numerator of one fraction and I'm going to cross multiply it with the denominator of the opposite fraction. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to take my 3 and my 6, I'm going to multiply them together to get 18. Okay, now I put my 18 over here with my 3 because I'm keeping my answer to the numerator of the number I just multiplied. Okay, so all I did was I took the 3 as the numerator of my first fraction and I multiplied it with the denominator of my second fraction. So 3 times 6 and got 18. And I just got that with the numerator of the number that I multiplied by. So now I'm going to look at my 4. I'm going to look at my 5. I'm going to multiply them together. 4 times 5 is 20. Okay? So what I did, I took my numerator of my second fraction and I multiplied it with the denominator of the opposite fraction. So 4 times 5 and I got 20. Okay? So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to look at which number is bigger. So I'm going to be looking at this 18 and this 20. Okay? Because when I'm cross multiplying right here, it's doing exactly what I was doing in the first method of getting like denominators, except in this case, I'm not showing the last step of having the like denominator of 24. Because in the previous method that I just showed you with the same example, in these two fractions, we would have to have the like denominator of 24. Okay, so I'm leaving that part out. So right here, if I'm going to look at 18 and 20, I know 20 is greater than 18. So I know my problem, 3/4 is less than 5, 6 because of the numbers I just made right here of my cross multiplication of 3 and 6 to get 18 and 4 and 5 to get 20. I'm looking at the 20 right here because it's bigger, so 5, 6 is going to be bigger than 3/4. So 3/4 is less than 5, 6. Okay, let's look at another example. Okay. So if I gave you the example 7/8 and 4/5, and I want you to compare them, okay? The first thing that should be going off in your head is I don't have like denominators. So the way that I can do this problem to make it make more sense to me instead of having to do extra work is figure out a multiple that both 8 and 5 have in common. Because looking at 8 and 5, I know 8 is not a multiple of 5, and 5 is not a multiple of 8. So I need to find the common multiple of both of these. So when I look at 8 and 5, the first multiple that comes across in my head is 40, because 8 times 5 is 40. So I'm going to have both of these fractions with like denominators of 40. Okay, so if I look right here, I know 40 is 5 times greater than 8. Okay, how I got that was 8 times 5 is 40. Okay, so I'm going to do that same exact thing with my numerator of 7. So I'm going to take 7 and I'm going to multiply by 5. 7 times 5 is 35. Okay, so when I look at my fraction 7/8 and I want to make this into a fraction that has a like denominator of 40, when I multiply both my numerator and denominator by 5, I get 35/40ths. Okay? So let's look at my second fraction here. If I look at 4/5 and I want to make my like denominator of 40, 40 is 8 times greater than 5. Okay? So how I got that was I took 5 and multiplied by 8 to get to 40. I'm going to do that exact same thing to my numerator. So I'm going to take 4, I'm going to multiply by 8 to get me 40. Okay? So if I do this, 4 times 8 is 32. Okay? 32 is what I got when I multiplied those two, and then 40 was what I got when I multiplied by 5 and 8. So if I look at 4/5 and I want to make this into a like denominator with 7/8 dealing with 40ths, because the common multiple of 8 and 5, my new fraction would be 32/40ths. Okay, so when I look at here, my denominators are the same, so I'm going to look at my numerators and figure out which one is greater. 35 is greater than 32, so that means 7/8 is greater than 4/5. Okay, let's look at the shortcut or the cross multiplication of this to do the shortcut to this. Okay, so if I put my problem back up here, 7/8 and 4/5, what I'm going to do, I'm going to be cross multiplying. So I'm going to be looking at the 7 and the 5, because I'm taking the numerator of one fraction and multiplying it with the denominator of my second fraction. 7 times 5 is 35. Then now I'm going to look at my 4 and my 8. Okay, and 8 times 4 is 32. Okay, so now what I'm going to look at is which number is greater. Well, 35 is greater than 32, so that means 7/8 is greater than 4/5. Okay? So I know comparing fractions can be a little tricky, especially if you have denominators that are unlike. Okay, so in this video, I just showed you two different ways, the long method and the shortcut method, to figure out how to use like denominators, or how to get like denominators to help you decide which fraction is going to be greater, less than, or equal to the other fraction. Okay, the more practice you get with comparing fractions, the better you're going to become. Okay, so if it's hard now, it gets easier, I promise. Okay, I hope this video helped you guys. Until next time, see you later.